Greetings, everyone. Well, for this week's movie review, I thought I would talk about one of my all-time favorite sci-fi horror movies, John Carpenter's The Thing. Today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Well, The Thing. Just about everybody I know has either seen or passionately loves this movie. For me, my first exposure to The Thing was an old EP, lo-fi, mono VHS recording that my parents made of it when it was shown on pay TV back in the early 80s. And it's actually significant in my personal history because it was the very first R-rated movie I ever saw. I was 12 years old and traumatized for life. Well, not really, but the first time I saw it, I did have a bit of trouble sleeping that night because it was quite disturbing. And the thing about The Thing that really impresses me to this day is the fact that it's another one of those wonderful films from 1982 that just really seems to have stood the test of time. You know, you can watch it today and it's just as effective today as it was back in 1982. Well, maybe not quite as effective as 1982. 1982, of course, it was very unique and different because there really hadn't been anything else like it. So let's break it down a bit, shall we, and talk about some of the things about The Thing that I think make it particularly special and noteworthy. So the story centers around a 12-man research team stationed in Antarctica right before the winter season starts in Antarctica. So very early on in the film we learn that communication is almost impossible with other bases and whatnot that are out there. You really get this sense of isolation, that these guys are basically on their own until spring breaks. Now the movie opens with quite a memorable scene where you see a husky being chased by a helicopter, and one of the men in the helicopter is shooting at the dog, trying to kill it. You don't know why, you don't know what's going on. Obviously something's wrong here. So it doesn't waste any time. It just gets right into it and starts the ball rolling. So the helicopter lands at the American base. The dog basically is taken in by the Americans. The Norwegians accidentally blow up their own helicopter, and the other one tries to shoot some of the scientists at the American base and ends up getting shot himself. So clearly something's up, and they don't know what's going on. So a few of them head on over to the Norwegian base to see if they can shed any light on what was going on. So they go to the Norwegian base, and they find that absolutely everyone there is dead. So they gather up what research they can find, whatever they were working on, to try to shed some light on what was going on and what they were working on. And just as they're about to leave, they find something unusual buried in the snow outside, just outside of the base. So they dig it up, load it into the helicopter, cart it back to the American base, unwrap it, and it's what appears to be a partially human thing, for lack of a better word. But a human that is partly mutated. Now I need to stop here for a moment and just comment. It's a very gory movie, but it's not gory in the way that most horror films are gory. A lot of the blood and guts and whatnot comes from autopsy scenes. First off, they find this unusual organic creature or partly human thing at the Norwegian base, so they thaw it out and they could proceed to do an autopsy on it to determine what it is. And these are the parts that are disturbing to most people because there's just a lot of very deliberate cutting and examining and, you know, close-ups and whatnot. It's not like a typical horror movie where people are just getting ripped from limb to limb all over the place and there's blood and guts flying everywhere. the gore here is very scientific and medical and thorough, and makes it more disturbing, and I think in a way makes it more real, because it's like you're right in there examining these things with them, you know. So they perform an autopsy on the one that they found at the Norwegian base and determine that all of the internal organs actually appear human, while on the outside it bears a passing resemblance to something that might have been human, at least partly, but otherwise looks completely unrecognizable. It's just this amorphous blob of some kind with things sticking out of it, and it's really hard to tell which end is up. Now, as events unfold, it turns out that what the Norwegians discovered was a crashed alien spacecraft which had been buried under the ice for roughly 10,000 years. And they found the pilot of the spacecraft buried in the ice a few feet away, so it was thrown out, or it crawled out, or what have you, and then froze in the ice and remained there until they dug it up. And what it turns out the pilot was basically an organism that can imitate other organisms. So it can perfectly recreate an organism. So what it does is, say it wants to take over a human being. What it does is it grabs onto the human and essentially absorbs and digests the person and then becomes them. So looks, sounds, walks, talks, acts exactly like that person, but is actually an alien. So it's an alien not just that shape shifts, but it literally becomes the person. There's a lot of speculation as to what exactly the nature of the creature is, and if the creature maintains, if you are an imitation of the former you, would you be aware of it, or does it hide itself from itself almost as if it acts instinctively and things like that. There's a really good commentary actually on all the DVD editions that have come out, and the Blu-ray edition as well, I believe, with John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, and they talk about that quite a bit in the commentary, how even they weren't sure a lot of the time. So it really does open a lot up to speculation. I mean, the alien creature in this is itself just so unique and so interesting that it can be the topic of conversation for hours, just full of speculation about the nature of it, and everybody has their own kind of take on it. I mean, you get, as you're watching, you get the basic gist of it, that it takes over organisms and becomes them, and basically it hides within. So a lot of the suspense in the movie comes from, well, a number of things. First off, the aforementioned isolation. This is very much a claustrophobic horror movie. The weather outside is terribly dangerous. I mean, you can freeze within minutes. So you notice whenever they go outside, they have to bundle up in heavy parkas and cold gear, and they actually have to have a tow line to guide them back to the base, because it's the storm, like the weather is just so heavy that you can get lost being a few feet away from the base. Like, that's how heavy the snow falls, and this big, just like, it's like winter's an endless blizzard there. So so there's that aspect of it, is the isolation aspect. And then there's also the paranoia aspect, because it quickly becomes apparent that one or more of the team members may actually be one of these creatures in disguise. Now, the other thing about the thing that makes it interesting is, because it's this type of organism, it doesn't really have a definitive shape or a definitive form. It just becomes whatever it needs to survive in whatever environment it's in. So you never really see what it actually looks like, or even if it does have just a definitive form of its own. Like, you'll see it when it's taking someone or something over, like it takes over some dogs, it takes over some people, and you see that a lot of the time in various stages. Sometimes you see like the beginning of the process where there's a lot of ripping and tearing and limbs reforming and bones cracking and skin ripping and stuff like that. Or you'll see it very close to the end of the process where it's almost completely turned into the person he's trying to imitate, or it's trying to imitate, and there'll just be like a hand or something that isn't quite formed yet, and it's very scary stuff. So it's great because it has this It has the sense of isolation, it has the sense of paranoia, and it's just such a dark film that John Carpenter describes it essentially as an end-of-the-world story. Because as they're examining these creatures and learning more about the nature of them, they realize that it's possible that just a small particle of it, or even a cell, could be enough to take over and infect and imitate an entire organism. Which means, if you get a little splatter of blood on you from somebody who's taken over, that could take you over, and there's no way you can stop it. I mean, that's very scary. So part of it is they are trying to deal with this creature without it getting away. And, at one point one of the team members goes crazy and smashes the radio and smashes the helicopter so they can't get away. Because he knows if this thing gets to a populated area, it could potentially take over the entire world. He does a computer projection at one point that says, number of hours from first contact, after which the entire world population is infected. And I think it was I forget, I did the calculations on it, it was a time span of about 3 years. So 3 years, or 3 to 5 years I think it was, from first contact with a populated area. That's how long it would take it to completely take over the entire world. That's pretty scary. That's an end of the world story, folks. But it's a very different kind of end of the world story. Now, one thing I do have to mention about The Thing, that you cannot talk about The Thing without mentioning in this day and age, is the fact that this was 1982, which means there's no CGI to be seen anywhere, which is wonderful. This is a prime example of just how good creature effects and practical effects can be with a little bit of creativity and ingenuity. And they use a combination of effects, since they use models, sculptures, puppets. They film certain things backwards or upside down, and there's just a combination of camera tricks and practical on-set effects. And it works so well, and you can really see it in the actors' performances. It's a great cast, too, by the way. I mean, this has got some real top-notch actors in it. You got, of course, Kurt Russell is the main character. You also have, actually, I don't list them on the back here. But off the top of my head, you've got, Keith David, who many of you would recognize as the voice of Spawn from the HBO Spawn animated series, and he's been in a lot of other movies as well. Wilford Brimley, the oatmeal guy, before he even did Cocoon, he did this. And he's great. He's great in it. And you'll recognize a lot of the other actors in it as well. A lot of fairly notable character actors are in there as well. And there's no females in the cast. It's an all-male cast. So you don't have the typical Hollywood subplot of some love triangle entanglement or anything. No. There's just a bunch of guys out in the middle of the Antarctic, trapped with this alien creature just trying to survive. And it's great. So the movie succeeds on several levels. I mean, it certainly succeeds as a claustrophobic sci-fi horror movie. It succeeds as a pretty good character piece as well. All 12 of the characters are quite well developed, well-rounded, and very believably portrayed by their respective actors. And it also succeeds as an effects piece, just to see what is possible without CG. Just with, as Rob Bottin puts it in the documentary on the DVD, with just wild imagination. This is the kind of thing I really wish, I really wish we saw more of nowadays, because this is a prime example of how creativity, imagination, and a little ingenuity can create something really enduring. I mean, this is an excellent, well-crafted film. I mean, this is John Carpenter at the top of his game. I think his 70s and 80s stuff was the best stuff he's ever done. But it's great. I mean, it's very scary, and it's a movie that you will not soon forget, because I guarantee you have never seen anything like it. I mean, this is also one of those movies that a lot of other films and even a lot of video games have been very heavily inspired by, mainly because of the creature design in it, because it's just so unique and interesting. The creature work in this was done by Rob Bottin and Stan Winston. Stan Winston has created some of the most memorable movie creatures in history. And Rob Bottin is no slouch either. He's done pretty much all the other most memorable movie characters in history. And it's just amazing. The DVD is really worth picking up. The Blu-ray I had some complaints about, which I addressed in another video. If you look up, I'll find the link to it and I'll put it in the description for you, just if you want to cross-reference there. So I'm not going to repeat what I said there. But the DVD edition is great, and the Region 2 Blu-ray apparently doesn't have the same problems. Because look at all the special features you get on there. Now prior to this, I've actually had the thing on Laserdisc before as well, twice. There was one that was just a plain Jane edition with the movie in widescreen, and then there was the special edition, which essentially has all the same content that's on the DVDs. The main reason to get this is there's an 80-minute documentary on the disc that interviews pretty much everybody involved, cast and crew, who was involved with the making of the movie. And it's really quite something to actually sit down and see how they put it all together. Because for a long time, you could kind of figure out some of it if you know about special effects, but a lot of it I was just left scratching my head, like how the hell did they do that? How did they do that in 1982? You know? And so it's really interesting to check out the documentary. And there's some additional footage here. There was some a few outtakes that were included in the network showings. Believe me, you don't want to see this on TV. It really needs the F-bombs intact because they're quite appropriate given the horrific nature of the situations they're in. Has this theatrical trailer, really good trailer, by the way. I remember being scared just by the trailer back when I was a kid. And it also has some additional footage that was shown, or that was actually cut from the film, some additional stop-motion animation for the final form of the thing as it appears at the end in the final part of the movie. Now there has been talk in recent months or years, I guess, of a possible sequel or remake of the thing. If that happens, I don't want to see any CG in it. But you know there's going to be. It's like when they remade The Haunting. You know, the original 1960s version of The Haunting is a beautiful film, and I'll probably do a review of it at some point and talk about it a little more in depth. But the thing about The Haunting that made it so great was that it was a haunted house movie that didn't show you anything. It left a lot up to your imagination. So what do when they do the remake a few years back? Loaded with special effects. It's just a special effects extravaganza. You see everything, and it looks crappy because it was all CG and really obvious CG. Yeah, I really don't want to see the same thing happen to The Thing. Now it's funny, talk about remakes. Herein lies the irony. This is itself a remake of sorts. Sort of, because there was a version of The Thing called, here I'll show you the cover, this is the DVD. I don't actually have this. I have seen it, I just don't currently have it in my collection. The Thing from Another World. Now in The Thing from Another World, The Thing was basically just a standard 50s alien invasion type monster, and there was women in the cast and everything, and it was a very different kind of take on it. And the monster was played by James Arness, who was quite a notable actor at the time. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is both movies are actually, one is not a remake of the other. It's actually two movies based on the same short story. Now in the case of The Thing from Another World, they based it very loosely on the short story, just kind of went for the claustrophobic horror aspect of it, but the rest was a pretty standard monster movie. Whereas The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, actually is a lot more faithful to the original story. The original story was called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, and it's not very widely available. I've been looking for it, and I haven't actually been able to find it anywhere. Might poke around online a bit, see if maybe there's a PDF version floating around out there. But I have not found anywhere that it's been published. Here's the thing about The Thing. In the original story, the creature was a shape-shifting creature that could take on the form of other life forms, much like it is in the movie. So the movie remains faithful to that aspect of it. I've been really curious to read the original story just to see what differences there were, because I've heard that there are some differences between the movie and the original story, even though the 1982 version stays a lot more faithful to the original premise. One thing I did find, however, was the novelization of the movie. And that's really interesting as well, because one of the things they talk about in the commentary, John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, is how much changed over the course of filming. Now, it's not unusual over the course of making a movie for things to change from the script, or some last-minute changes as you go, or scenes get cut for budgetary reasons or whatever. But in The Thing, there's like whole long, massive sequences that connected significant events that aren't even in the movie. And, you know, so the book actually plays out quite a bit differently in some cases. But I understand why they did that. Like, for example, in the book, there's a sequence where one of the dogs escapes and is trying to, like, get away from the base. So they go off hunting after the dog. And it's a dog that's actually a thing in disguise. And there's this whole long sequence of them chasing the dog, and one of them gets infected along the way and turns into a thing. And it's this huge, elaborate sequence. But, you know, in thinking about it and talking about why the movie works so well, I can kind of understand why they decided not to do that in the movie and instead simplified that sequence of events and, you know, got from point A to point B via slightly different means and less complicated means. Mainly because I think over the course of development they decided it would be better and more effective just to keep it isolated on the base rather than having them go off on adventures. I mean, they go off to the Norwegian base at the beginning, but that's it. Other than that, as soon as they come back, they're stuck there at the main base of theirs for the rest of the movie. And I think it works a lot better that way. But it's interesting as a longtime fan of the movie to read the book and compare it, because it really shows you, because I mean the book obviously was adapted from an earlier draft of the script, and then over the course of filming things changed. They decided to go in slightly different directions. But the book remains as kind of a testament to how it was originally written. And as such, I think it's really interesting to compare the two. You know, so if you're a fan of the movie and you want to see kind of how it developed and get a little more insight into the process of how some movies are you know, change over time, see if you can track down the original novelization. It's a little hard to find. I don't know that it was ever reprinted. I found it in a used bookshop for like $5 or something like that. But good stuff. So what do I give The Thing? Well, I can't help it. I got to give it, you know, I'm going to give it a solid, I'll give it 4.5 Z's. Why would I give it 4.5? Well, because it's not perfect. I mean, there are some minor flaws, just some minor logistical flaws in it, but nothing that I would, you know, hesitate to recommend the movie to anyone. But it's not a perfect film, but it's definitely one of the best sci-fi horrors ever produced. Oh, I should also mention the music. The score in this is a wonderful experimental combination synthesizer and orchestral score by Ennio Morricone, of all people. If you don't know the name, you might recognize this. Do-do-do-do-do, do-do-do. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Come on, everybody knows that theme, and I just hummed it really badly. But
you did it really bad.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, the music in The Thing is by the same guy, the guy who did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and he did a lot of other notable movies throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And yeah, great composer, one of the all-time great soundtrack composers. And the soundtrack of The Thing is interesting because it's very minimalistic, but very effective and very memorable. You won't forget it. You simply will not forget it. Just as the movie as a whole, you will not forget. So if you're looking for something different and you're sick of CG, check out The Thing. You will not be disappointed. Well, that's it from me to you for now. So until next time, sayonara.